I'm going to talk about some basics of cleaning up your artwork to prepare it for coloring inside Photoshop. So let's go to File, Open, and open up your artwork. As you can see, this artwork has quite a few pencil smudges in different areas. So we're going to clean this up with the Levels tool. Shortcut is Control L to bring up this panel, or you can go to Image, Adjustment, Levels, and we'll start bringing up this little white arrow towards the left. And what this does is it increases the amount of white and reduces the gray spots. If I bring it up all the way, you can see what happens here. So we'll do it a little bit until we've got a good result. Something around here looks pretty clean. If you bring the black arrow towards the right hand side, this actually darkens your line art. So you can play with this and get it to the level that you like. And the gray arrow in the middle, depending on which direction you bring it towards, it either increases or decreases the amount of grays that are in your pencil work. So I'm not going to touch this too much because it looks fairly clean. Maybe around this point. So now we've actually got the sketch clean enough that we can apply color to it. So what I'll do at this point is add a new layer by clicking on the Create a New Layer button down here right next to the Recycle bin, the second button from the right. And now we've got a second layer on top in our Layers panel. If you don't have this panel open, you can click on Window, Layers, and select your brush tool, shortcut B on your keyboard, or you can select it from your Tools panel. I'm going to select a brush. If you wish to increase and decrease the size of your brush while you're coloring without having to open the panel and do it manually by hand, you can actually use the square brackets on your keyboard to increase and decrease the size of your brush while you color. This can save you some time. So as you can see, the colors are actually going right over top of the line art, and the line art is not showing through. So what we want is to set the layer transparency from this little drop down menu here to multiply, and this basically makes it see-through. So now all your colors are showing, your line art is showing through, and the color is not messing it up. But there's actually a problem with this kind of technique. If I want to add another layer, let's say that I use this pink color and I refined it and I really liked how I did it in this area, and I don't want to mess it up, so I'm going to make a new layer and apply my second color on the separate layer. But see, now we have a problem. We would need to set the second layer to multiply as well, but this will not achieve the result that we're going for, because now we've got two layers that are set to multiply, and it only starts to overlap the color. You don't actually get the original color that you're looking for. So to avoid this technique, what we need to do is have our line art above our colors, so we don't have a ton of color layers set to multiply, but instead just one transparent line art layer. So let's try that out. So I'm going to close this. I'll open up a new piece of art. This one actually has a blue rough sketch underneath it. A lot of the time in animation you've got your rough sketch, and then to save some time, some people do their cleanup sketch right on top of the same page rather than tracing it onto a new page, because there's ways of cleaning this up. So you can go to the channels panel here. Again, if you don't have this panel here, you can go to Window and click on Channels, and this should appear. And if you click on the blue channel, you'll notice right away that majority of the blue disappeared, leaving behind our cleaned line art that we did on top of our rough sketch. But we can further refine this. So we'll open up, while we have the blue channel selected, we can open up the levels panel, Control L, and let's brighten it up a little bit. Let's bring the white arrow towards the left a little bit, and you can see that majority of the rough spots over here are starting to disappear. Refine it to the point that you're happy with. And if you've still got some smudges left, you can simply erase them with the eraser tool, shortcut E, or you can select it here in your tools. So now what we've got is some clean line art that we can use to make our transparent layer. So what I want to do is right click this blue channel that I'm happy with, and I'll duplicate this channel. So right click and click on duplicate channel. You can name it whatever. By default it's called blue copy. You can name it Lineart, and then select your new channel that you've created. Click on the little eye symbol here so it's visible, and we're going to invert its colors. So we're going to invert the selection. Shortcut Control I on your keyboard, and it will give us something that looks like this. Now you'll see where we use this later on. So click on RGB again, the RGB channel, to reset your drawing. Go back to layers. So now we're back to where we started. So I'm going to clear out our stage. I'm going to delete everything here. Control A to select everything, and Control X to delete everything. Again, that's Control A, select all, and Control X, delete all. So I'm going to make a new layer down here by clicking on the new layer button, and I want my line art to be on this new empty layer. So I'm going to go to Select and Load Selection. Now in the Load Selection panel, there's a drop-down box for Channel, and if you drop down, you'll notice that your new channel, whether it was called blue copy or whatever you called it, would be available in here. So select that and click OK, and you'll notice that now you've got a selection in the shape of the line art. So we're going to fill it up with black. Pressing D on your keyboard will reset all your color palettes. Let's say you had some crazy combination going on and you wanted to quickly reset the color palettes to black and white. Just press D on your keyboard, and now it's reset it to black and white. So to fill your selection really quick, the shortcut is Alt-Delete on your keyboard. Or if you want to learn the long way, it's Edit, Fill, drop down this menu, select foreground color, and click OK. But Alt-Delete will save you a lot of time. If you want to, also if you've made too many mistakes and you want to go back further, you'll notice that you can only do undo once by doing Control Z. But if you want to go back further, you can go in the history by opening the history panel and it's got your last few actions saved in here, so you can go further back if you like. So let's close this. Again, if you can't find the history panel, go to Windows, Window, and History. So now what we have with this line art is that the line art is actually transparent. So if I select the background layer and turn it off, turn the visibility off by clicking this icon, you'll notice that it's see-through underneath. There's nothing underneath. That means this will give us the ability to actually color our line art. So we can select our background layer. Actually, I'm going to label this first. So double click where it says layer 1. Now let's call it line art. It's always a good idea to label your layers, because if you end up with a ton of layers afterwards, it'll be easy to figure out what is what. So let's make a new layer by clicking on the create new layer button, and I'm going to add some color on here, and this time around I won't need to set the transparency of the layer to multiply or anything, because it's already transparent line art. All the white is transparent. So I'm just gonna select my color layer. If your layer was above it, you can just click and drag to move the layer order so that the color is underneath. And let's select a color. If you don't have the color that you need here, by default I think your color palette will look something like this, but you can load more colors by clicking on this little arrow down here, or up here I should say, and wait, my panel is going outside my recording area. Let's see. So click this little panel and click on any one of these color palettes. I normally use True Match colors. It's got a ton of, click on a pen, and you'll notice it's got a lot of nice shades. So I'm just gonna pick a nice color from here. With my colors layer selected, you can just drop in some color directly with the paintbrush, or you can go to the line art layer, select the magic wand tool, click our area, go back to your colors layer and press Alt Delete to fill your selection, and then you can fill in smaller areas by hand for further detail. Now with this you can actually make multiple layers without messing up your other colors. You won't have to worry about the colors mixing in like we had before when we set 2 layers to multiply. So working with layers is really good, because let's say I make a mistake with the hair, the color went out. I can simply erase it and not mess up the colors on the other layers, which I might have spent a lot of time fixing and finalizing. So that's a good thing with that. Plus with this method, another good point is that you can actually color your line art, not just fill in the color, but color the actual lines. So I'm going to make a new layer above the line art, right click and set it to create clipping mask. So click on this. Now whatever color you put in here will actually go on the lines and not on the empty areas. So you'll notice that it's actually changing the color of the line art. This is the kind of style that you see in a lot of Disney cartoons. The outlines in 2D cartoons, the outline colors of the different areas are basically a darker shade of the color that you're using for the fill, which gives it a nicer look. So let's say I'll make a new layer. I'll call it skin, and let's say I did the, what? That's not what I want. Alright, that looks like a skinny color. So let's do this, and now I'm going to select my line art color. I'm going to call this color as well the clipping mask, and I can change the color of the line art around the skin area only with some fine tuning, which gives it a nicer look than just having black line art. But if that's the look you're going for, you can just have it solid black. Or you can just fill everything in with a solid color if you want all your line art to be red or blue. Plus you can make multiple layers for your clipping mask as well. Like let's say I wanted the hat here to be red and the hair to be orange in the line art, but I don't want to mess up my line art for the hat, so I can just make a new layer and then set that to clipping mask as well, and then do my other line art on the second layer, so that in case you make a mistake, like let's say you go over something that you didn't want to, you can just erase it without losing the previous color that you had. So I'll open up a new piece of artwork. Now this sketch is quite messy, so I've decided to clean it up entirely in Photoshop by redrawing it. So what I'm going to do, the first thing I'm going to do is lighten up the artwork a little bit. Control U will bring up the hue saturation panel, and if you bring the lightness level up towards the right hand side, this will brighten your line art a bit. I'm doing this so that I can distinguish between the new clean line art and the rough sketch. So I'll make it light enough that I can still see it. And I'll make a new layer. This is where I'll do all the new line art with the pen tool. Shortcut P on your keyboard. By default, it might be set to the shape making pen tool. You want it to be set to the paths one. The shape one will basically give you something like this, but that's not what you want. You want it to make a clear path, so change the settings up here to the one that says paths. We'll zoom in here. I'm going to select the pen tool. I'll click and click again. That makes a straight line. And if I click and drag, this actually gives you a curve with anchor points. You can edit these curves at any point if you've got some mistakes in it. With the direct selection tool. So if you press and hold on the arrow button here, you'll see there's multiple tools hiding inside. Same for other tools. If you press and hold on it for a second, there's other tools. You can switch between those by pressing shift while holding on to shift while pressing the shortcut for that. So the shortcut for this tool is A on your keyboard. So with shift A, you can switch between the black arrow and the white arrow. You want the white one. So what I'll do is I'll click on this path with the white arrow, the path selection tool selected. So not the path, the direct selection tool. And I'll fine tune this path a bit. And now what I want to do is select my brush tool. And I'll set the diameter to something that will look good. In this case, I'm going to use 2 pixel. That might be fine. You can go with 3 pixel or 4 pixel depending on how big or small your drawing is. And I'm going to switch to the paths channel, paths window here. Again, if you don't have this up, you can go to Windows and Paths. And what you want to do is select the path, and with your brush tool selected, you want to click on this little button, the second one from the left, that says Stroke Path with Brush. And when you click that, you'll notice that your selected brush will make a path all around your pen path. If you didn't have the brush tool selected, let's say you still have the pen tool selected and you clicked on the stroke path button, you'll get this pixelated line, which looks pretty ugly. So remember, you have to select your brush tool and then click the stroke path button. But this can be a long process, switching back to path, clicking on your path here, and then clicking this button. So what we'll do is create a action for this and create a shortcut, so we never have to come back to this panel ever again. So before we click on the stroke path, what we'll do is open up our Actions panel, go to Windows, Window Actions if you don't have it already up, and what we'll do is make a new action by clicking on the Create New Action button. It looks exactly like the Create New Layer button down here. So click on this. We'll call it Stroke Path, and I'll give it the shortcut F2 on my keyboard, function key F2, so that whenever I press F2, it'll automatically stroke the path with my selected brush and delete the path and get me ready for making the new lines. So I'll click on Record. Now everything you do here will get recorded, so you have to remember to stop the recording once you're done. So now with my brush tool selected, I'll click the button here, and now I'll right click on my path and delete this path. So now all that we're left with is simply the line. And now I'll switch back to the pen tool, and I'll stop the recording. And this actually gives us a custom shortcut. So now let's try using it. So if I go back to the background layer here, I'll make a new layer above it. I'll just call it white. I'll fill it up with the white color. Control backspace will fill up with whatever color you have in the background here. Alt delete fills with the foreground color, and control backspace with the background color. And now you can turn this layer's visibility on and off by clicking on the eye icon to see what your cleanup line art looks like. So what we'll do is I'll just keep this white line art here just so I can check once in a while. Let me rename this to line art. So now we'll be able to do this process a little bit faster now that we've created the action. So I'll select the pen tool, click, click, click and drag to get a curve here, and then click. You notice there's a funky curve happening. So we'll switch to the direct selection tool, shortcut A, and pull in this anchor. And now all we have to do is press F2, and that's converted it to line art. Once you get used to this, this can get very fast. So I'll do this and press F2. And for lines that are coming to an end in an open area, it's usually nice to taper them off to a sharp edge so that they don't look too computerized. I'm going to do the edge of this carpet here, and you'll see what I mean. So press F2, and it's made it slightly rounded here. So what I want to do is I'm going to grab my eraser tool, set it to like a hard round eraser, and I'll simply taper off the edge here so that it's not rounded but a little bit sharper. I'll show you the difference between the two different types. So let's say I make a path like this. I'll select my brush tool. I'll actually increase my brush size a little bit so that it's a little bit more visible what happens. I'll press F2, and this is what's happening. The path makes a solid line of the same thickness all the way around. So to make it a little bit nicer, you grab your eraser and taper off the edge into a sharp point. This works especially well when you're doing hair. There. It looks much nicer than that solid line of the same thickness going all the way around. And once you have your line art done, you can make a new layer. Right click, set it to create clipping mask. I actually have this recorded as a function as well. So you go to action, create new action, call it clipping mask, and set it to whatever shortcut you like. I'll set it to F12 or Control F2. I'll just set it to F12 and hit record, and I'll make a new layer, right click and set it to create clipping mask, and now I'll stop recording. And now every time I press F12, now I'll delete this to show you what happens. So every time I press F12, it'll make a new layer and set it as a clipping mask for whatever layer I'm working on. This can be especially handy when you want to create clipping masks for your colors. So first, I'm going to go in here. I'll add some color on my line art. And now I'll go down the layers, make a new layer for my table color. Actually, I'll make a folder, which is the button right beside the new layer. And I will start putting all of my color layers inside this folder for easier access. So I'm going to put the table color inside it. I'll start with just a solid shade. Now you can fill this in by using the wand selection tool on the line art layer and then coming back to the color layer, or just going to the color layer and coloring directly with your tablet or Wacom, Cintiq, whatever you use. And then now I'm going to use my new shortcut that I made, F, and that's given me a new layer which is automatically set as a clipping mask. So now whatever I do on this layer will stay inside my set to the brush tool, will stay inside this color. So now I can shade it all I want, and the shading will not leave my tables area. So I'm gonna select a shading type brush. This one looks nice. If you want this kind of a view, you can always access your brushes by right clicking on your stage area, and it brings up this kind of panel. You might have a lot more brushes than I do here. And you can click on this round arrow, this round button with the arrow in it, and select stroke thumbnails, and that'll show you these kind of samples, as opposed to the small thumbnails which might be set by default. So set it to stroke thumbnails. I like to see what the brush is gonna look like, and I usually like this kind of a brush which works well with pressure sensitive tablets, and I'm gonna use it to create my shading on this layer. I don't even have to worry about going outside the lines because the clipping mask is gonna help keep everything inside that main area of the main color layer that I made underneath. So I can press F12, and that's made another clipping mask for the table. where I can add further details. Let's say I want to add one layer for highlights, one layer for shadows, anything you like. And if you want to do shadows, you can try setting the transparency of the shadow layer to multiply. So whatever color you put in here will add on to the base color, making it darker. Or you can just shade it by picking a darker color. Now let's say I make a new layer. I'll drag it underneath the table, and I'll use the lasso tool, shortcut L, but I'm going to switch to the polygonal lasso tool. If you don't have a tablet, this might work better for you. It allows you to make bigger selections with straight lines. So this is going to be a selection of my carpet, and I'll select a base color for my carpet. Alt delete to fill it in. I'm going to label it carpet in my layers, and then F12, which was the new shortcut I made for a clipping mask. And now whatever shading you do in here, whatever designs you want to do, it'll stay inside this carpet area without messing anything up. So that's a good use of clipping masks. You can use it for colors, for shading, and for coloring your line art itself. The one last thing I want to talk about is how to move around your canvas while you're zoomed in a lot. You'll notice there's a little hand tool here, but if you have that selected, you can only move and not really work. But if you press spacebar while using any tool, you can still have the same functionality. So let's say I'm using the polygonal lasso tool and I was making a selection. You'll notice if you try to go to the side, this kind of stuff starts happening, and it might make your life hard to reach the correct point. But if you press spacebar, you can actually move your canvas around while still staying on the polygonal lasso tool. It can help with also the pen tool, so you don't have to switch back and forth or use the sliders on the side or switch to the move tool, but simply stay on whatever tool you're using and press spacebar to move it around, and it continues using your whatever tool you were selected